Welcome to the U.S. National Science Foundation webinar for PESOSE, the logistics webinar on how to create an account, get your roles to submit for NSF. So my name is Stephanie Yee, and I work in the office of the Chief Information Officer, and my role is to basically, I'm the point person between our IT service desk and our developers and our program. This is my contact information. I'm going to go ahead and get started on what we will cover today. So this is a session that's mainly on the technical piece on submitting a proposal to NSF. It's meant to complement the program webinars that has been offered. And these are the key topics I'm going to go over. Just pure logistics, what you need to do before you even start your proposal in Research.gov, some highlights of the sections that you need to upload or complete that is more complicated or more complex. I'm going to go over some of our newer sections in case you are not new to NSF, and then of course some solicitation-specific requirements. I'll talk a little bit about Grants.gov as well and how to get help in case you are encountering issues in preparing your proposal. All right, right from the top, you are here because you're interested in applying to 26-506, the PESOSE solicitation. The deadline for this is on September 1st, Tuesday at 5 p.m. submitters local time. So I'll go a little bit over what that time frame means. So proposals can be submitted in two ways. It can be submitted through Grants.gov or Research.gov. These are some links, but this session is going to focus more on Research.gov because that is the NSF custom-built application for proposals. All right, and I have on this presentation links to the relevant help links on that page. All right, so I would like to talk about the submission timeline. We do already have a generic timeline, recommended timeline for people on when they should start their proposal, when they should start these pieces. There's a link here that gives you pretty good guidelines about how many days, business days before certain milestones that you need to start these tasks. In this presentation, I'll pull out some key milestones that you should keep in mind, especially if you're new to NSF. All right, I'm going to hop over to what you need before you even start. All right, account management milestones. You need an account with us, with NSF. But before you even start that, your organization, the organization that you belong to, you work for, needs to be registered with the federal government. So the very first step, if you are new to NSF, you've never applied to a grant, is you need to register your organization under SAM.gov. If you have not started this process, I recommend, it's August 5th right now. Actually, now is a good time to start. But we give general guidance that you need to start this 15 business days before the deadline. But I recommend doing this now. You'll never know what kind of hiccup you will encounter when doing that. So please register your organization through SAM.gov. When you go through SAM.gov, I want to clarify what can happen when you register through SAM.gov. When you go through that site, there's, I would say, two steps. One is you need to get a UEI number. So that is a unique identifier for your organization. But that is just one piece. Once you get that number, the second part of that is you need to fully register your organization. That must be in place before you even can begin an application. So not just a UEI number, you're only halfway there, you need to be fully registered. I would say one tip for fully registration is you will have an option to do, I'm going to apply for financial assistant awards only, or if you're going to apply for all awards. Choose financial assistant awards. What that means basically is that you don't need to go through the process of getting a cage number. That is not required for NSF, so that would shave off maybe a couple of days in your registration process. So that's just a tip I have for you. So start this process now. And I'm going to keep going. So these are the milestones here. Once you get your organization fully registered in SAM.gov, it takes at least one business day for that registration to be seen by our systems in Research.gov. So give that a day. If it's over the weekend, it might actually be 2 business days before we can see that organization. But once you get that registration, you can start in Research.gov and you need to register your organization with us. Once you register your organizations in Research.gov, the next step is you need to start giving roles out to people who can do actions with your organization at Research.gov. So I have on the slide what you need at a minimum. There's many roles that you can have in Research.gov, but to get through this proposal submission process, you need 3 roles, or 2 roles. Actually, 3 roles. One is the very first step is the administrator role for your organization. This is the person that has the most elevated privileges for your organization. They can update information about your organization, but most importantly, they can give out roles at your organization. So that is the very first step. The only person that can register for an administrator role is the person who's listed on your SAM.gov profile. So when you register at SAM.gov, you do identify who are admins or the points of contact for your organization. Only those people can go into Research.gov and make that initial organization registration in Research.gov. So make sure that person does all these steps well in advance, 15 days, 20 business days before the deadline. Once that administrator is in place, you can then start giving out roles as the PI. You can give out the PI role and the AOR role. Those are the 2 must-have required roles to work on a proposal. So that is the PI role and the AOR role. I have over here on the right-hand side an optional role. This is called the Other Authorized User role. This is a role that you might want to have somebody work on the proposal. So they're not officially on the proposal. There might be helpers, people who are just there to help edit documents, to manage the movement of this proposal. This is what they would have, an other authorized user. And I recommend doing all of this 10 to 15 days before the deadline. All of these things I'm going to go over in the system so you can help connect the dots of what you need. This slide is regarding subrecipients or sub-organizations. So this only applies to you if you plan to have other organizations as part of your proposal. So they are subrecipients. There are slightly different requirements for this if you choose to have this. So subrecipient organizations don't need to be fully registered in SAM.gov, but they do need a UEI number. So if you remember, there's 2 phases to that registration. They only need that first part. They only need a UEI number. However, they do need to complete one of these 2 steps. So there's a step 2A and a step 2B. These are your options. They can go all the way. 2A is that option. Your subrecipient can go all the way, get full registration. It will save you some headaches, but it's your choice on what you want to do. 2A, you can skip all the steps in 2B. They're fully registered. You can add them as sub awards. Might take an extra 1 or 2 days to get that full registration in SAM.gov. So the work is upfront in SAM.gov. If you say, well, my subrecipient doesn't want to do that, they just want a UEI number and move on with their lives, that's fine. You would then have to do step 2B. So 2B, basically the work is then front-loaded to Research.gov instead. Our system cannot read organizations automatically if they're not fully registered. So there's a manual workaround for people who don't want to be fully registered. They have to call our service desk and provide us this information, and we have to add the sub-organization manually. So build that in. It's either a couple days on the SAM.gov side or a couple days on the Research.gov side. So these are their 2 options. All right. And this slide is for Grants.gov users. I will say this presentation is not geared towards Grants.gov applicants. I will tell you that everything I just explained, everyone has to do, regardless if you're Grants.gov or Research.gov. But if you choose to do Grants.gov, you have an additional step. You need to also do registration steps in Grants.gov. So this is an additional step if you are choosing to do Grants.gov. All right, I'm going to pause there before I kind of jump into specific sections and see if there's any questions to address. If not,
So,
yes.
Stephanie, this is Florence. I don't see any questions in the chat, but I'm not sure if the attendees understood that they could put questions in the chat. So maybe we give them a couple of minutes. But I
Sure.
don't see anything in the chat right now.
Okay. Yes, everyone can do chats and we will review it throughout the presentation and I'll answer them live. All right, thank you. All right, senior key personnel. So this is one of many sections that are required for your proposal, but this is one section I would say that needs additional steps or are more complex than just a file upload. So for each senior key personnel, including the PI or co-PIs, there are 4 required documents for each person. They're listed here, but 2 out of these 4 documents need you to get this document from a system called ScienceCV. So ScienceCV is a system not hosted at NSF. It is hosted by NIH, and that requires a different login. You can use NSF login to get in there, but you have to use that system to build these 2 documents. So please give yourself extra time. I recommend that people work on these documents actually first, just because of how long it takes to get those documents. And there could be technical difficulties in getting to NIH and uploading these documents. So I'm just pointing out a slightly different, more complex requirements to get these 2 documents. We recommend starting on this 10 business days before the deadline. I will go over this in the demonstration. And here are some training resources and videos to help you through that. All right. I'm going to be very brief on the next couple slides. We have a new to us at NSF, a data management plan section. In the past, it used to be a file upload, but now we have an integrated web form. I will show you this in the demonstration and show you how this works. It's meant to be very flexible. It's meant for you to put in your own user-defined fields in there. So it's just a matter of just clicking through, answering the required questions. It's meant to be flexible. All right. Highlights of solicitation-specific requirements. I'll try to hit on these in my demonstration. This is not meant to be an exhaustive list. I just picked these just because they were something that I could easily highlight to you. One note, separately submitted collab proposals are not allowable. The option will be there on the screen, but please don't use that. And we have a section called Other Supplementary Documents. This section is optional for most of NSF proposals, but it is not optional for this solicitation. So even though it says optional, it is not. So please look and review very carefully the solicitation. And in here, we're expecting letters of collaboration and the list of project personnel, collaborators, and partner organizations. I have in here some notes about this. It is recommended to be in a tabular format. I will note to everyone that this section is checking for page size. So sometimes when people have a tabular format, it sometimes can get too long and it will violate the page size. So I would say please be careful and making sure it's not violating page size. Project description, depending on the track you're applying to, they have different page format requirements. Our system cannot check to know, it's not smart enough to know if it's a track 1 versus track 3, so it's on you to make sure you are not violating the page counts. All right, and I'm going to transition from this PowerPoint slide to the demonstration, but before I do, just some highlights of things to keep in mind. When you are uploading your proposal components, please be mindful of the font requirements through our procedures guide. we are looking for only these particular font families, Arial, Corio New, or Palatino linotype of 10 or larger. We do have line spacing requirements. There should not be more than 6 lines of text per vertical 1 inch of space. And then for LaTeX users, I would say ballpark 30% of people do use LaTeX instead of Microsoft Word, for example. You do have a more complex system of creating these documents. Please, if you're a LaTeX user, test your documents early and often. And use this link here. We do have a GitHub site for those users. They have unique requirements. They have different templates. Please test your documents. Don't leave it to the last day to test your LaTeX files.
Stephanie, before we move
Yes.
on, I just realized, so my bad, the chat is closed, but the Q&A is open. So we have a couple of
Oh,
questions, which I'm not able to answer, so I'm hoping you will.
all right.
Some of these revolve around registration, the requirements around UEI, what's required. If you could go over that again, and I'm losing when I respond to something, so maybe oh, here they are. Let me just pull it back up. I realized we have somebody, for example, asking, I'm applying from a nonprofit. However, the 501c3 is not through the IRS yet, and it won't be by the time of submission. So how would they go about registering with SAM.gov in this case?
So I've I'm gonna say this is a better question for SAM.gov. So they do have their own service desk. I'd recommend starting there. But if you want to cover all your bases, I would say create a ticket with them and with us, and then we can at least have two eyes to look at that question. Um, but I'm gonna punt it over to SAM.gov for that one.
Okay, maybe I'll just reinforce because I know there's lots of confusion when we have multiple systems.
Mhm.
So we have individuals who might want to submit via grants.gov. What I'm hearing is you can do that, but you also have to do some registrations around research.gov. I'm
Yes.
also hearing that sam.gov has its own help desk. So could you just kind of reiterate for everybody
Yes.
the distinct differences between those in terms of when you're trying to navigate a problem, to remind yourselves that you got to leave plenty of time, and the kinds of interactions that NSF may or may not have between these groups. So maybe you could
Yes.
speak more broadly. Yes.
Okay, great. So SAM.gov is not an NSF system. That is a federal-wide system for anyone that wants to do business with the federal government. So not just NSF, maybe Department of Energy, etc. So SAM.gov is where you need to start to register your organization, and they're a completely different website, entity, agency, and registration there needs, and questions for that needs to go to SAM.gov. We are a downstream consumer of anything that comes out to sam.gov. So before you even start with our system, you need to be fully registered with the federal government before you can interact with NSF. Research.gov is the core website for NSF to do any business with NSF. So research.gov should be the second place that you start from. This is where you register your organization with us so we know who you are. It's the place where you um, tell us who is going to be the PI, who's going to be submitting your proposal. So all the roles will be dealt with in research.gov. That's where everyone needs to start. If you choose to go through grants.gov, you can, but you always have to start with research.gov. You have to tell us who you are, who your organization is, who your roles are. If you choose to go to grants.gov, your third step is then grants.gov to do that. I will tell people to make your lives easier. Research.gov is meant to be end to end, meaning you can start and end in research.gov and you don't have to use grants.gov. That is an option for people if they want to use grants.gov. I will be um, transparent with you. Most people who apply to NSF grants don't use grants.gov, they use research.gov. If you do use grants.gov or any of these third-party system to system, you can do that, but I will explain to you in the demonstration that is challenging. because many of the required forms that NSF requires is not in Grants.gov. So even if you submit a proposal through Grants.gov, you will most likely have to log into Research.gov anyway to complete the forms that Grants.gov is missing. So if you want to make your lives a little easier, I would say you don't have to go through the Grants.gov path. You don't have to register through Grants.gov and just keep everything in Research.gov and the Research.gov help.
Fantastic.
Oh yes.
Yeah, I have another one related to that, just to reiterate, and then I'm going to ask Marlon, another one of our PDs who's on the line, if he's seeing anything as well. So if a university is a primary, a nonprofit is a sub, would that nonprofit also need to register with SAM.gov? Could you remind us of that?
Yes. So sub-award organizations, the only requirement we need is they need to have a UEI number. That's all they need. And so that is very quick to get, very easy. So you have to go to SAM.gov to get a UEI number. Um, but if you remember back in the slides of 2B, 2A, let me go back there. Because our system at NSF cannot recognize organizations that are not fully registered, you would either have a choice. The sub-organization, the nonprofit, would either have to go ahead and register their organization just to go all the way. Then we will see that organization in our system. If they don't and they just have a UEI number, no problem. But they need to have an open ticket with us at NSF, call Research.gov and say, hi, I'm a nonprofit. I only have a UEI number. I did not fully register. I want to be a sub-organization on a proposal, but I need to be manually added to your system. And they're going to ask you for these pieces of information. We need to know the UEI number, the name, the address, etc. So I hope
Thanks,
that
Stephanie.
answers your question.
Yeah, I might add to that for PIs that might be on the phone or co-PIs, that if you're having conversations about what the institution or your proposal needs, you probably want to loop in your business people because you may or may not be able to have those kind of conversations without your authorized organizational rep. It varies by organization. So it's really helpful if you pull those staff in or those persons in so that you don't run into an issue at the last moment. So, but we have another question. And then Marlon, if you are seeing anything you want to raise, I know we have quite a few. Um, let's see, which one was this? Yes, this one is about permissions. And I know we've seen this a lot. And so maybe you could speak to two things. Is what's the optimum strategy when you're assigning permissions, right? Because there's segregation of duties and what's permitted. So this attendee is asking, can the same person serve as the authorized organizational rep and a PI or a co-PI? So, what are the rules around sort of the segregation of duties and who can sign up for the AOR position as well as another role?
Okay. That's a great question. So NSF realizes and needs flexibility for small organizations and large organizations. So you can have one person that is everything. You can have one person assigned as the admin, the PI, the AOR, and everything else that Research.gov offers in terms of a role. We have organizations as small as one person that can apply to proposals at NSF. So the answer is there's no limitations in terms of who can have all the roles. You can have one person. If your organization is that small, it is flexible for you to have one person for all of these roles. Um, Usually I see one administrator that's just the administrator of the organization and someone else that does the bulk of the work. So I see more of a single administrator is one person, but then another person is the PI, another person is the AOR. So it's really dependent on how your organization is run. Right.
Fantastic. So Marlon's on. I'm going to ask him. There are a number of questions which I could continue to go on and ask. But Marlon, are you seeing anything that you think is broad enough um, to share? Okay, I do want to see. I'm seeing some questions around collaborators, and I want to be maybe call to your attention, there's a difference between letters of collaboration versus collaborators who may come in as a subaward or other. So in our other upcoming webinar, we're going to talk about things about letters of collaboration. But if it's about a subaward, uh, there are no limits on the page. But if you're talking about a letter of collaboration, there are some constraints. We'll talk about that in another webinar when we have more time. Let's see. Get some questions around for international participation. I see that Marlon's fielding those, so that's great. Let's see. Yes, the webinar is going to be shared. So if you've attended or if you've been on our other webinars, just go to the PESOSE website and we'll have this posted in a couple of days. There's some questions around budgets. We're going to talk about that's a programmatic issue. So we'll get these questions and respond to those about how to treat those costs. So stay tuned for that. Same with salaries, et cetera. Those are all programmatic kinds of things that we're going to talk about versus the system kinds of things. Same with I-Core, we can answer that. It's kind of a straightforward. So there's a question, Stephanie, about your reference that talks about the page max sizes. And you say 11.5 by 8, 8.5 by 11. So they're asking, is it 8.5 by 11 or 11 by 8.5? So maybe it's your reference on one of the slides was a little bit confusing. Yeah, could you go back to that and clarify?
Yes. So it's a basic page size, 8.5 by 11. The different dimensions that I mentioned is meant to illustrate portrait and landscape mode. So it can be portrait or it could be sideways, but it can't be longer than that. So legal size documents, which are 11 by 14, I believe, that's not going to be accepted by our system. So I hope that helps. It can be landscape, could be portrait, could be a mix. It doesn't matter.
Okay, there's a question I think Marlon's asking about submission types. So he's answered that. Thanks, Marlon, around who can submit to the program. So he's taking care of this. This is that is in the solicitation. So it's not just for IHEs, which you'll find, but there are all other kinds of many types of institutions. Let's see. Lots of questions, programmatic questions. So we're gonna punt on those. We'll try to answer them in the Q&A, but also talk about them more in the forthcoming webinar. There's a question, as a PI, do I have to register and link to my organization? So maybe you could talk, Stephanie, sort of through those principles, again, for people that are not used to submitting. How does this work kind of
Yes.
collectively between the entity and the PI?
Yes. So I'm logged in Research.gov already, and I want to direct everyone's attention to my profile. So I'm gonna try to speak of this in the lens of someone who's completely new. Maybe they're the admin on that organization. And I just saw a question of how do I know who's the admin on an organization? So when you go to SAM.gov and you look up your organization UEI, there's a list of names on there. Whoever set that up will say who is the point of contact. And when that organization is registered and we see that at NSF, we know who those are and we will actually show it to you on the screen. So I'm going to click on my profile, pretend I'm the admin. So before I even get here, I'm not going to sign out, but Research.gov is a system that requires a login, an account to get in. So before you even can start and do these things, every person, every body at your organization needs to have their own NSF ID that you need to register so you can log into this website. So please don't have one account that everyone shares. That is not permitted. Every person with a unique email address needs to have an NSF ID. So if you can see here, this is my NSF ID. I'm not going to sign out, but there's a link to say, hey, I don't have one. Please register. It takes less than a minute to get an NSF ID. But imagine I'm the admin. I just completed my SAM.gov registration. I'm here at NSF. I'm going to click on my profile. My profile is what it sounds. What's your name, your email address, your phone number, etc. But what I'm going to draw your attention here is organizations and roles. I'm going to click on View My Roles. So if you're new to NSF, this screen will be blank for you. For me, I have some items here. So if you're new, this page will be blank. So what you want to do now is add a new role. So over here, there's a link called Add a New Role. Over here, you're going to see 4 boxes. You can ignore most of them, but the one the admin is going to be focused on is over here. It's the Add and Manage Organizations. You're going to click on Add Organizational Role. This is how you are going to go through these steps. So there's 4 steps where you can find your organization and register that at NSF. So this is the UEI number. This is where you enter that number and you go ahead and search for it. When we search for this, we have all the data from SAM.gov of people who are registered. So if you haven't finished registration at SAM.gov, you can't find yourself in this list. But let's imagine that you have already done that. Everything is registered. So I'm going to show you what it looks like. Ignore this message at the top. When you enter UEI numbers, so this is NSF's, I imagine I entered it, you're going to search on your UEI number and you're going to get results back. That's going to look like this. So you'll see your organization name, your UEI number, and someone asks, who do I know my admin? Who are those people? We know who those contacts are and they're going to be here. So when I click on this link, it's going to show me all the names that, let's see, let's click next. Here, you're going to see something called SAM POC. These are the only people registered for your organization that could claim that admin role. So I recommend that if you're completely new to this, get your admin to perform this step, and the admin is going to be the one that's registered in SAM.gov. So let's say I've gotten to this point. On the right-hand side, there's a column called Registered with NSF. If you're completely new to NSF, this is going to say no. Once you do that, so it's grayed out for me because I'm already registered. Once you add your UEI, pull that information up, that SAM.gov admin is going to go through a series of steps. We're going to ask things like confirm your time zone, confirm your address, confirm this information for your organization, and then you're going to submit it and your organization is registered at NSF. And that administrator is the person that can give out roles. So imagine I've completed that step. I'm the admin. I want to give out roles to people. So there's 2 perspectives on this. A person who has an NSF ID can request it. So your people or your employees can go in and click on Add Investigator Role. I think it's easier for the admin to just do all these steps because it's a one-stop shop. The admin has complete control. So I'm the admin for the National Science Foundation, and this is how I add roles to anyone that I like to my organization. I'm going to click View My Users. So View My Users is a link that's only seen by the administrator, and I'm the administrator. So here I can see everyone that's associated with my organization. If you're new, this is going to be blank. There's a button on the right-hand side called Add User. This is the easiest, most straightforward way to just start adding who you need as PIs or AORs. So I'm going to go ahead and just add a sample person and click search. You find the person that you want to add, you click continue, and a pop-up is going to show for you of all the roles you have available to you to give out to this person. My friend here, George, is already a PI, so imagine that this is completely unchecked. This is where you will select who can have what kind of roles. And someone asked, can I have a person that's a PI and an AOR? Yes, you can. So here I'm going to select all of these roles and click Save. Once I click Save, it takes up to 30 minutes for the system to apply this role throughout the system. So just keep that in mind. Don't be giving out roles or responsibilities on the day of the deadline. Please get this done well in advance before the deadline. I'm going to pause there because that was a lot to cover in terms of roles. As you can see, there's a lot of steps for multiple people. This is why we want you to do this 10 days, 10, 15 days before the deadline. Any questions on this?
Yeah, let me, I'm still scanning these. We've got a lot of questions around indirect cost rates. Um, um, the applicable standards, whether it's the FAR or the UG. I'm going to ask, I put in the chat that those kinds of questions, if you send them to the PESOS mailbox, I'll be able to give you a fuller response. There's lots of questions I have, so it's a little bit hard for me to do on the fly. I do have, or just a question or comment. You talked about groups that are new to NSF and all of the requirements in Research.gov and SAM.gov. I wondered if it'd be okay for me just to mention or remind groups, this is very different than the new performer review. So we're going to touch on, we won't touch on that today, but we will touch on that in another webinar. So there's a definition of new that relates to actually having awards, which is very different than what Stephanie is talking about. So we don't want you to get confused. There's a whole set of other requirements. If you are successful and you are recommended for an award, that you'll be required to go through. So we want to make sure that you are aware of those. We'll go through that in a different webinar, but wanted to separate that from the conversation that Stephanie is having about access to systems and working with the federal government through these online systems. I'm buying myself a little time to go back through this. So I wanted to come back to this thing about list of collaborators. And the person is asking about the list of collaborators. I wanted to make sure that everybody's clear that there are letters of collaboration. And then there's, and Stephanie, do you have this table? I think it was one of your earlier slides that shows those requirements around that. I think that might be helpful for one of the attendees and others to see. It was
Oh,
early on.
yes.
Yeah,
Uh,
remember that? It had like a table and it says who are your partners, who are your collaborators, and then had letters of collaboration. It was like very early
oh,
on.
yes. Yes.
Yep.
I can go back to the slides after I do the demonstration and
Okay,
show you that slide.
yeah, yeah,
Um, all
let's
right.
do that. We have a question about what fraction of phase two post awards have used subawards and is a lead plus two subaward structure typical here? I don't think we can talk about sort of this question around fraction of phase two subawards because I think that's a programmatic question, but there's nothing stopping a team structurally from having multiple subawards in the system, is there?
No, there's no limit on subaward organizations that you can add to your proposal.
Okay, all right. So why don't we go on to the demo? In the meantime, I'll continue to go through these questions. They're very good. So thanks to everybody who's putting them in there, and thanks for being patient with us as we move through these.
Thank you. These are great questions. All right. I'm in. And one thing to note is after you give out your roles, the PI is the only role that can even start a proposal. So if you are that person, the PI will go in here and you will know you are the PI or you have roles for that, is that you have the link available for prepare and submit proposal. And once you select here, you want to prepare new. You want to create a new record. When you click here, there's a lot of different types of records, but for our purposes, we're going to select full proposal. If you see full proposal, but it's grayed out or it has a lock, that means you don't have the PI role. So check your roles. Once I select that, if you happen to have more than one affiliation, some people do, you will get this drop down, but for most of you, you'll only have one affiliation. To prepare a proposal, you have 4 steps or 4 questions that you need to get through before you even get to your draft of your proposal. The first step is to select the funding opportunity. So there's a search box, and as you type in a number, it will filter down. So this is 26-506, and you click next. Step 2 is where to apply. This is just showing you where this proposal is going. There's nothing you can edit here. Click next. Step 3 is to select your proposal type. The default value that everyone should be selecting is research. Click next. And step 4 is your proposal details. This is where you will select a single proposal because separately submitted is not allowed for this. And this is where you enter your proposal type. This can be changed after the fact. So for these purposes, I will just put a test title, but for you, you will be selecting or entering which track you are applying for. So actually, I'm going to say track 1 as a test. And then I'm going to click prepare proposal. If you make a mistake in any of those 4 steps, except for title, for example, if you put in the wrong number for the solicitation, you accidentally select collab, you would have to start over. Anything except for title, you cannot change after the fact. So add an extra test here. I'm going to make this screen a little smaller. So just to orient yourself, this is where you'll be doing most of your proposal section uploads. This top section is required. The system is checking for a file in each of these. So as you start filling this in, you will see the compliance status have a little green checkbox or maybe a red X to say there's a problem for you to fix. On the left-hand side are your proposal actions. This is where you will start doing things to your proposal, printing it, forwarding onwards, submitting, etc. The most valuable button here for everyone is there's a check errors and warning button. I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And this is going to show you everything that you must fix before you submit your proposal. So I just created this. It's completely blank. It's telling me that every single section needs to be corrected, which is fine. If you see a yellow box down here, these are warnings. And one thing to remember about warnings, they are meant to kind of tap you on the shoulder to say to have a double check on this, but it won't stop you from submitting. So kind of keep that in mind if you're kind of running tight on the deadline. The reds are what you must fix. I'll go back to the main proposal page. And so I'm not going to go over all of these sections. I'm just going to highlight the ones that are a little more complicated. So everything is required. And remember, for your solicitation, if you read the solicitation, there are required components that are expected in your other supplemental documents, and you have to upload those here. This is an open section, meaning we're not checking for a lot of, because for other solicitations, there's a lot of other things that could be in here. The hard stops for this is it must be within the correct page size. So 8.5 by 8 by 11.5, landscape or portrait, and it cannot be larger than 10 megabytes. So please check for that. All right, I'm going to click a little bit on Manage Personnel and Subaward, and this is where your people or your organizations are going to be added to this proposal. So I'm going to go ahead and click on here and just kind of show you really quickly how this works. So when I click in here, this is where you would have the opportunity to add your subawardees. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this, kind of show you what this looks like. So remember I said for subawardees, they don't need a full registration. However, there's a choice that you have to make whether or not you want to fully register, get it out of the way. If you go that route, your organization will show up on this list. But if you go the other route, you say, I just want a UEI number, you still have to call us at NSF Research.gov for us to manually add that subaward organization here. So I'm going to go ahead and put Virginia here. So I just searched on Virginia. It's hundreds of results. These are all organizations that have either full registration in SAM.gov, they show up here, or they called us and had it manually added. So those are the 2 choices for a subawardee to show up on this list. And then this is where you can add subaward organizations, and there's no limit to how many you can add. All right. Manage personnel, you may be adding co-PIs or other senior key personnel or other authorized users. For most of them, you can add people by NSF IDs or by their emails. For senior key personnel, you can add them but the same way, or you can add them by name. And they don't need NSF IDs. A common problem to have here is that when you're searching for people, you don't find them. The number one reason that we find that's the case is because this person may not have a role yet. So keep that in mind. Get all your roles provisioned and everyone ready to go so they could be found to add to your proposal. All right, my time is short, so I'm just gonna highlight some key sections that are a little more complicated that people just need to be aware of. All right, I'm just gonna touch really briefly on project description. This is the largest part of your proposal. It's either 7 pages or 15 pages. Please note that depending on your track, your page limitations are going to be different. I'm going to go ahead and upload a 69-page document. The validations on this is going to stop at 15. It's not smart enough to read the title of your proposal and know that it's track 1 or track 2 or 3. So just be aware of that you have to do that compliance check yourself. The hard stops on project descriptions are there's no URLs allowed. This is meant to ensure that you don't try to bypass the 15-page limit. So please check your files often. I see a lot of people get tripped up by the URL checks because they're hidden links in your proposal. It can be an image with a secret link or even text that contain www or HTTP can cause a file to fail upload. All right, and just checking the time here. The only thing I just wanted to show everyone is the data management plan and to show you something that is meant to be there. So the data management plan is a web form field. It's pretty self-intuitive. So, follow the instructions on the screen. It's pretty easy to use. I would say just one thing to watch out for is as you add your data products, there's a series of 8 questions to ask. Please note that adding a product here, there's no predefined fields. So you might see some help guides online that has already different fields in here, like software or maybe an article, etc. Just know that for different directorates or different solicitations, there will be pre-filled values, but for this one, there will not be pre-filled values. So for each of these, you have to add your own. So here I'm going to say, I don't know, test product, and you have to define it on your own. So it's okay, it's flexible. There's not meant to be any values defined here. You will define those. All right, that's all I want to say about data management plans. I think this is pretty straightforward. I would say from a management perspective, I highly recommend that once you create this proposal to go ahead and share your proposal with your organization. So under here, you might notice a button called share, and you're probably thinking, what does that mean? When a PI creates a proposal, only the PI can see it. No one else at the organization even knows this proposal exists. I just recommend as good practice that as you create the proposal, just share it right away. This lets everyone in the AOR office or anyone with that role know that the proposal exists and that it is ready for people to update, to edit, to modify. So I recommend just doing that. When you do that, it will send an email to everyone, letting them know this proposal exists, the link, and they can access it. So I just recommend that people do that. All right. Other things I want to highlight is just more for reference. On the upper right-hand corner, if you needed help on something, I highly recommend looking at our help. It's a lot of stuff here, but I understand a lot of people don't want to read through a lot of help. The second best thing is to contact us. So here is our way of contacting our service desk. Our service desk is very good. They know how these systems work. So there's not a phone number per se, but there's a link here to our service desk. When you click on that, when it loads, we have ported over all of our FAQs in here. So if you ask, I want help on the proposal, you will have all these articles very easy for you to find an article that probably addresses your question. If none of these work, there's a link up here called Submit a Request. This will automatically create a ticket with us. I highly recommend that if you create a ticket, just fill this out really quickly, and if it requires a phone call, someone will call you. So this is a really easy way to get help. All right, I'm going to switch over back to the PowerPoint presentation, so this will be a good time to ask questions.
Yeah, we're getting a lot of questions around collaborative proposal, collaborators, and letters of collaboration. So I think there's some confusion. So I'm going to try to kind of break this out. And then if we look at that slide, so a collaborative proposal is a type of an arrangement for how you submit your proposal, right? So in theory, it's where all submissions are equal. There's no lead with subs. Stephanie, correct me if I'm right.
Yes.
A collaborator is an arrangement you have with the project or the group that is submitting the proposal. So if you're a collaborator in your role, you have some relationship with the project or the proposal. And a letter of collaboration is an expression, a formal expression of your role with the project. So the letters of collaboration and the details around what should be contained in those and how many are required are in the solicitation. We'll go through that again in another webinar. The list of collaborators and the collaborative proposal type, we'll talk about here in a minute. So I think Stephanie's going to show you these requirements on what you should put in the system. So this is that slide, Stephanie, that has the list of collaborators, if you remember. Yes. I think there was another one as well.
Was it earlier that I showed it?
I think so. There you go, right there.
Okay.
Yeah. So you can see the letters of collaboration are different. This is what's required. We'll talk about the content in another webinar. And then there's a whole separate list that's required as part of the supplementary docs that have collaborators, partner organizations, and project personnel. And then Stephanie, do you want to reiterate again sort of this difference between a lead with subs, collaborative proposal submissions, and what's allowed with this program?
Yes.
Yes.
So I'll start with what's not allowed. So what's not allowed is what we call a collaborative set with multiple organizations, and each organization submits their own proposal. So if you remember that step 4, when I created the proposal, there is a radio button that said, yes, I'm submitting separately. So this is a complicated, everyone has their own proposal ID, everyone submits their own proposal. That is not allowed for this solicitation. What is allowed is a single proposal. So you are submitting a proposal and you might have organizations that are going to be working with you, but it is still one proposal number. And if it's awarded, that only goes to that one organization. And it is that organization's responsibility to work with those sub-organizations. But to NSF, the award goes to that organization that submitted the proposal. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, so there also is a little confusion around roles, who could assign the roles and what
Okay.
entities are allowed. So I think it's worth reiterating that the award goes to the institution, not to the PI. Right. So for this reason, the decisions and the rules around who gets to have privileges is usually done at the entity level. So even though Stephanie has said that the PI could be the AOR, that decision about if that's feasible and allowable is made by the entity. So if you're a small nonprofit and you are the owner, you get to make those decisions in theory, probably. If you work for an academic institution, I'm going to guess that those decisions are made out of the institution, typically at a sponsored research office or quote business office. Did I miss anything, Stephanie,
That's
on there?
correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
Could you remind everybody then, if they're all wondering again, remind them where they would go to find out who their AOR is? Because there's lots of questions like, where do I go to check to see where it is?
Oh, well, who is my
Who's in
A?
that role?
So when you share a proposal, I can go ahead and change the screen again. I'm going to change the screen again. I'll show you. So when you are a PI and you say, I want to share my proposal, there's going to be a link on this page right here that you see. I'm just checking, do people see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. If you click on this link, it's going to tell you who all the AORs are for your organization. So NSF has a lot, but for you, it'll probably be one or two people. So this is how you would find your AOR staff. Hope that answers your question.
And if they can't find it here, should they reach out at the r.gov site and they could help them? Is that a good place to go as well?
Yes, yes. If you are unable to find someone that can give you those answers, you can also contact rgov at nsf.gov and we can tell you who the AORs are for your organization.
Okay, lots of other questions. I'm scanning these. Um, I'm looking down. I think we've covered most of these. We got lots of questions around cost, budget, what's allowable, what's not allowable. We'll cover that in a future webinar, a programmatic webinar. Some of those, oftentimes those are dictated by your institution, but the budget for sure is set by the PI. So we'll talk a little bit about some of that, but it's 2:58.
Yes.
So Stephanie, anything else you want to talk about? And then I can just maybe talk quickly about where the slides will be posted and
Yes.
how we're going to handle additional questions coming in.
Okay. I'll whip through I'm going through the slides really quickly. I do want to mention a little bit about Grants.gov. There's a lot of people that asked about Grants.gov. You don't have to use Grants.gov. Research.gov is completely self-contained. You can live in Research.gov world completely. You don't have to go out to Grants.gov, but I will warn people that if you do use Grants.gov, most proposals submitted at NSF do not go through Grants.gov just because of how complicated that interaction is, especially since a lot of the forms that we require are not in Grants.gov. So we give people, these are all the things that we cannot handle through Grants.gov. Give yourself, if you're going to choose to do this anyway, at least 5 business days. Do not try to submit a proposal in Grants.gov on the day of the proposal because it has to go through all these steps and you're likely having to fix them anyway in Research.gov. So I think that's all I had. A lot of the things on how to get help are on the slides themselves with relevant contact information. And that's all I have for the slides. And I can wrap up with any questions or final thoughts that Florence, you think we should cover.
Yeah, I think we've covered most of the questions. I've encouraged, if your question didn't get answered, I've encouraged you to put it in the mailbox, PESOSE at nsf.gov. Some of these are very detailed. We want to make sure we give you the right references. And there may be some back and forth. So please submit those to the mailbox. I'm trying to go through those as fast as possible. We will have these slides posted to the PESOSE website. It'll take a couple of days. So these slides will be there. The webinar will be there, along with the recordings from the past webinars. We have 2 more coming up. One that's going to get into proposal preparation, budget, thinking about your letters of collaboration. The other one's going to be more generic, more broad about the program. We've had so many questions. So that's all I have. Stephanie, thank you. This has been fantastic. Lots of good participation. And we look forward to seeing the slides on the on the website. So thanks to everybody who attended, and please continue to submit your questions. We're hustling to get everything answered. Hopefully everybody found this helpful.
Thank you for your time.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye.